Question 5. Should USA reserve at least 40% of places for women when electing delegates to NUS UK and NUS Scotland Conference?
Do we have anyone to speak for us? Emma?
This mic's on, we can just use that mic. Is it in the people? Just speak it.
The reason I'm proposing this motion is because in USA, in the NUS and in national politics, women are chronically underrepresented. So just to give you an example, at Edinburgh, 56% of our students are women, but this year out of 7 people going to NUS UK conference, only 1 of those is a woman. And it's the same case for NUS Scotland. Out of 5 delegates elected this year to go to NUS Scotland conference, only 1 of those is a woman. This means that our women students are not adequately represented at a national level. Despite the fact there are actually more women than men in education, the sexism that's prevalent in society means that there are many issues on campus and beyond that still need to be tackled and campaigned on. Over the past year, the NUS have been fighting to protect education funding and student support on campuses in Scotland and across the UK, and those who have been hit hardest by the budget cuts are women. It's therefore really important that women are able to engage in and vote on NUS policies to help shape the campaigns that NUS will be working on over the next year. I understand that some people have some reservations about the use of positive action as a means of ensuring gender equality, and so I'd like to tackle some of those concerns directly. First of all, wanting to improve women's representation is not about doing women favours or being unfair to men. It's about realising the talent of a group of people who have been constantly disadvantaged by the structures that we currently have. It's about giving women an equal chance to be involved by putting them on a level playing field with men, free from the disadvantages of status and opportunity that currently exist in NUS. This motion is also not one to patronise women or give women an easy ride. It's a chance to break a deadlock on representation in which men currently dominate. It's used to saying to women, we want your views, we value your views, and we want you to stand in our elections. I'm sure many of the women present here today will understand how it feels to be in a meeting dominated by men. I'm really not ashamed to say that it can be intimidating and it can be really hard to get your views put across in a substantial way. When we actively listen to women, when we welcome them into our structures, we're speaking to everyone who's ever doubted their ability to stand or have the confidence to stand before. Student unions have always led on gender equality, and this motion says that we're a union that recognises where inequalities exist and tackles them head on. So I'd urge you to vote for this motion.
Is there anyone wanting to take a speech against? Okay. I allowed Emma 2 minutes 15, so I'm going to allow you the same as well, so you have up to 2 minutes 15.
Okay, I know you're all going to hate me, but I'm going to do it anyway. I feel like the whole point of this is to make men and women equal, and by kind of falsifying the fact that you're kind of forcing, well not necessarily forcing, but unequally giving them this position as part of their thing. Like, women should be able to earn it, and like, I completely understand that we live in a male-dominated society, and maybe it is easier for men to get elected, but by kind of just letting women kind of easily slip in, it doesn't actually make men and women more equal at all, and like, it doesn't actually change kind of men's opinions in lots of ways. They don't necessarily feel that they've earned the right as much, and like, as an individual, as a woman myself, I would much rather be able to achieve something and know that I did it for what I am. Whereas now if I got elected onto that, I kind of feel like, oh, well, I'm just being elected because I'm a woman, and that they feel like they have to have women. Like, I feel like it's not actually allowing individuals to stand up for themselves and do what they want, and women to empower themselves instead of just falsely setting the standards. Don't really know, but yeah, there we go. I just feel like it's not actually a positive thing for furthering women's place in society. It's kind of a bit false.
Stand here for questions?
Yeah, Kirsty, do you want to stay at the front again?
Is there any questions from the audience?
If this passes, how do you intend to set up the election so that this would happen?
Okay,
So the reason I propose 40% in the motion is somewhat of a practical reason, in that our delegation changes, our delegate entitlement changes, and so 40% allows it to be rounded to the nearest seat. So at the moment, for example, NUS UK, it would be 3 out of 7, but that would obviously depend on the number of seats we had. And the way it works is the way the ballots are counted. Basically, the women's papers would be counted, the women's ballots would be counted first, and so those spaces would be filled up, and any woman who did not get elected would then go back into the rest of the counting, which would be counted openly. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? I'm not sure if I explained it well enough, but it's basically about how the votes are counted, and that the women's seats are filled first, and then any women who've not been elected go back into the other seats, which are open seats in which anyone can run, and then the rest of the ballots will be counted normally.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to respond to that? It's more of a question directed, a procedural question. Okay, that's fine. More questions. Pick on that.
Yeah, I guess my question's for Kirsty. I was wondering, we have the general principles, which I'm sure we'd all accept, that men and women are equal, there's no difference there, and as has been pointed out, women are chronically underrepresented in this role as well as many others. Why do you think that is, and what would you actually suggest to solve that problem?
Well, I feel like lots of the other things ESA's doing, like on Wednesday there's a thing to help women like do public speaking and holding all events like this and encouraging more women to stand and to make them feel stronger that they can do things. It's much better actually empowering women and encouraging everyone than kind of, like when I went to a conference at the weekend and we had to vote for people, I didn't vote for any of the women because I knew they'd get elected anyway. I felt it was a bit pointless, and they did. And, you know, like, you kind of, then it puts people out of what they think is most important. So yeah, I think you've got to just encourage more women to feel like they can do it for themselves and feel like they can stand up instead of kind of falsely forcing them into the position.
Emma, would you like to respond to that?
I very, very much understand the concerns that this isn't a sort of ideal option, and I've heard people describe it as a necessary evil, and I understand the point where that's coming from, and I do agree we have to do other things as well. We do have to be putting on workshops, we do need to be encouraging women to come forward and stand, but if you look at other student unions where this policy has been implemented, the fact is that more women stand in the first place. It's a tactic which really makes sure that women stand and they have the confidence to stand and they feel valued in our union. I think that's so important because these other methods, they've been tried for years and they're just not working. And it's not this isn't an end in itself to equality. It's a means to encouraging more women to stand, and hopefully we will be in the position one day where we don't need to have these kind of reserved seats because there will be genuine equality. Unfortunately, that is simply not the case at the moment.
Thank you. Is there another question? Have you got the mic? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go for it.
This is a question directed mainly to Emma. You said that we have 7 NUS UK seats, only 1 is currently going to a woman. I recently discovered that we now have 8, and there have to be a further election before our NUS conference. Will that election, if this passes, will that election be open to women only?
Good question. I haven't actually had any further discussion on it, so I'm not going to sort of commit either way. I'd probably say it's a decision for student council or student council exec to make, but I think it would probably be an open place and it would be implemented during the full NUS elections in October, most likely.
Thank you.
Okay. One question. We'll take.
Yeah, so just be interested really to hear as to whether I suppose delegate quotas or reserved places have been implemented in other students' associations and the kind of results or kind of outcomes we've seen there.
Okay, very broad question. Do you have an answer?
So yeah, this policy does exist in a number of other student unions. A couple of examples are Manchester University, Swansea University. NUS Wales also gender balanced their delegates to NUS Wales conferences as well. But I'd say the most interesting sort of conversation I had was with a further education college in Bournemouth. And they actually said that since they'd implemented reserved liberation places for their NUS delegates, they'd seen a huge rise in women, in disabled students, in mature students, in student parents standing in their elections full stop. And I think that's really a really important thing to note. It's not just about NUS, it's about who gets involved in our elections more generally, and I'd really like to see that being replicated in our own union.
Do you want to take a response to that, or just
Fine.
Okay, we'll do one more question.
This is for Emma as well. You made some very good arguments, I thought. I'd be interested to know why, if you believe this very strongly, why you, which I'm sure you do, why you haven't rolled this out across student council elections or any open place elections, or like block elections, basically. Why do we not have quotas in that? Why is this question not reflecting that?
Yeah, really good question. In our new constitution, we've really made some significant advances on reserving places for each liberation campaign on every single one of the new councils that will exist. And obviously those positions haven't been elected yet. What I would say is this will be a good trial to see what the feel of the student body is on things like this. And I'd like to see how that works on the new councils with liberation places reserved. And I think it's something that absolutely should be reviewed in a couple of years to see if this passes now, how it works, and whether that should be extended. But we do have, I think, we've made significant steps to increasing participation of liberation students within the new constitutional structures.
Okay, I'm guessing you don't want to?
Fine.
Okay, one more question then.
You seem to have referenced to it quite a bit. It's for Emma. You seem to have referenced to it quite a bit, but I was just wondering if this passes, would you support other liberation, a similar thing for NUS, for other liberation groups, for example, black and minority ethnic students or LGBT students at NUS, because, as you've said, it exists already in our student council in some way?
Yeah, personally, I would support it. What can I say? Particularly, I think something that is often ignored is the real lack of representation for BME women, and that is such a big issue. And that's something that personally I'd really like to see happen. I'd be absolutely in favour of extending it to other liberation groups as well in the future.